Hi everyone, my name is Dina. I'm back today with another video for PotomacBeads. Today I'm going to show you how to make my grandma's garden necklace. We're going to be using an 18mm Potomac Rivoli along with some Athena cast teardrop forms. We're going to put that together using a lot of brick stitch and some Peyote Stitch. We're going to put it all together and make a really beautiful flower. So go to the list of supplies that's listed down below and gather those up along with your bead on it board. Meet me back and I'll show you what to do. Alright, so let's get started with our grandma's garden pendant. So to start out, you will need to get your 18mm Rivoli out. You don't need it right this second, but you're going to need it after you get your bezel done. We are going to bezel that with 11/0 Delicas today. So to get completely around your 18mm Rivoli, you will need to start off with 46 of your 11/0 Delicas on your thread and needle. And I'm just going to briefly go through this. There are several videos on how to bezel a Rivoli. There's different types of beads that you can use and all sorts of stuff. So I'm just going to go through this really quickly, this first part. So I just made it into a circle, just went through a couple of beads, and just like peyote, you're going to pick up one, you're going to skip the next bead in line that your thread is coming out of, which is going to be this bead, and then I'm going to go into the next bead. And then when you pull tight, of course it's loose right now because I like to hold mine. I do not like to use a stop bead when I'm doing these type of bezels, and then it should look like that. So one more time, we're going to add a second one. Oops, got loose again. That's going to happen for a couple of beads. I'm coming out of this bead, skipping this one, going into that third bead, and then pull tight. And then they should sit like that. So go ahead and continue around. I will meet you back at this last bead that we're going to add over here where my left thumb is sitting at, so I can show you how to do your step up. We'll end up doing a total of 4 rows of Delicas, then we'll add 2 rows of 15s on one side, then we'll flip it around and then do 2 rows of 15s on the other side. So I'll meet you back and show you how to step up. Okay, so now I'm to the point where I'm going to add my last Delica on this row. So picking up a Delica, coming out of this one, skipping this one, going through the last Delica in line, and I'm going to go ahead and step up, which means I'm going to go through the very first bead that we added on this third row of Peyote Stitch. Now, if yours is like mine, if you don't use a stop bead, yours may be a little looking like it's kind of twisting. Like this is flat this way right now. You can see it kind of like that. This right here is flat that way. As long as you're not twisting your beads or twisting the thread around, then it should work out just fine. If you don't know for sure, just go ahead and add the bead. I mean, it's really not going to make that big of a difference as long as you're not constantly twisting and twisting and twisting. So if you're unsure, just go ahead and go through it. If it looks great after a few beads, then great. If not, then go ahead and back it out and then try to flip your beads around so you're going through the right one. So now we're going to add our 4th round of our Peyote Stitch. And if that does happen to you on second thought, you can always take your starter thread and just pull a little bit tighter on it, and that kind of tightens that first row of the Peyote Stitch, and that should help you out a little bit. So this row is a lot easier. You just pick up a bead, and then I'm working on the right hand side because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you'll be working on the other side more than likely. Just pick up a bead. You're going to skip that hole that's sitting there, and you're going to go through the next big bead that's sticking out. And then that's all you do. So I'll meet you back at that last bead again so we can step up, and I'll show you how to start adding the 15s. Okay, so we're back around to the beginning again. So we're going to add that last of your Delicas. Coming out of this one, skipping this one, and this is the bead that we're going to go through, which is your first bead, or the last bead that you need to be going through, and then also go through the first bead of the current row that you're working on, that you're finishing just now. So now when you get that, you should have 4 rows of peyote done. Now how do you count your rows of peyote? This is how I do it. I start with 1 bead, and I count as a diagonal. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So those are your 4 beads or 4 rows of peyote with the Delicas. Now we're going to do 2 more with 15s. Same process, except you're picking up 15s. So pick up a 15, coming out of this one, skipping that hole that's sitting next to it, and just going through the next stick out bead. So just like that. So pick up a bead, go through the next one that's sticking out. So go around. I'll meet you back at the beginning, or at this bead right here, show you how to do that step up for that second row of the peyote. Okay, coming around to that last row again, or that last bead, I mean. So we're adding the next 15. That's that last hole, so we're going through that next Delica, and we're going to go ahead and step up through the first 15 that we added on the row that we're completing right now. So now we're going to add a second row of 15s. So just skip the Delica, go through the 15 that's sticking out. And your bezel should start to kind of cup inwards a little bit to make it look like it's going this way. Going like that when you hold it, when you look at it this way. Or it'll be going like this, making a dome if you have it facing this way. Doesn't matter. Same thing. So what we'll end up doing is we'll add this second row. And I always recommend, just like everybody else does, to go back through your last 2 rows of your peyote stitch when you're putting in any type of crystal, whether it's or stone. Whoa, sorry, dog is barking. Whenever you put in any type of stone, whether it be a crystal or a gemstone, always go back through your last 2 rows of peyote and reinforce at least once. I will just do it once because in this pattern this will be exposed on the front side, but then on the back side we actually cover it up with some more 8/0s, so it gives it a little bit more stability in the back. But on the front side you may want to go through your last 2 rows of your peyote a couple of times, more than just the 2 times. Completely up to you, just depends on if you've lost a stone in the past. I luckily have not, knock on wood, yet, because I'm sure it'll happen sometime or another. But just continue around until you get your 2 rows of your peyote stitch done on this side. Reinforce it at least once, like I said, and then meet me back and I will show you how to move to the other side of the peyote, just in case those that are a little bit newer at this and not sure how to do that. Meet you back in a minute. Okay, so now we have our 2 rows of our 15s on the back side of the Rivoli. Could be the front side as well, just depends on what you want to do. I always do my back side first, just in case. That way if I mess up on something, then it'll be on the back, and more than likely you won't see it. So currently my thread is coming out of the outermost row of the Delicas, 15s. So I'm going to go through that first row of the 15s, add a diagonal, and then also that next 15, or that next Delica, add a diagonal, and then work my way until I get to the other end. If you can get your needle to go through several at a time like I did, I just got through 3 of them, perfectly fine, because that's where you want to end up, is on the outer edge of the other one. Now I'm pulling on my starter thread some, there again, because I don't use a stop bead on this one, to kind of tighten it up a little bit. Make sure that those are tightened. It'll still kind of loosen up just every once in a while if you don't use a stop bead like I'm doing. Just every once in a while, just tug on it and it'll help with your tension and everything, because it will loosen up while you're trying to bead. So now we're going to do the same thing with the 15s. Just pick up a 15. Thread is coming out of this side, so we're going to skip the hole and we're going to go through the next bead that's sticking out. So that's all you do, is you do that. Now in this one, before I go too far, I always put my Rivoli in. Man, these things look awesome. I love the peach color of this one too. It's very summery feeling. So I always put mine in. And then, like I said, I always do the back side first. So that's the back side. And then here's the front. Now, of course, the Rivoli is going to fall out right now. So all you have to do is usually about halfway around your first Your first row of 15s is when the Rivoli will finally sit in there without you having to do anything. But sometimes you have to go all the way around before it actually fully sits in there. So that's the way it looks when you have your Rivoli sitting in there. So you're going to want to do your 2 rows of 15s again. And like I was saying in the last clip, you may want to go through it, you're going to need to go through it at least once. You may want to go through it a second time. Once at least, so that way you have 2 threads going through each bead around your bezeled Rivoli. So that way it won't come loose anytime soon. So just continue on like we've been doing. That's what it looks like after a few of them put on. So continue on, do your 2 rows, then reinforce, and meet me back and I'll show you how to tie it off, because there's a couple different ways that you can do that. And in this one, it may be a little bit different than what other people are probably thinking that could be done. So I'll meet you back in a minute and show you what to do. Okay, so when you get your Rivoli bezeled with the Delicas and the 15s on both sides, it should look something similar to this. I think this color combo is pretty awesome. This is the first time I've seen this Rivoli bezeled, because I've done this one already, and then I did one that was in a cyan color also. So this looks really cool so far. Okay, I really like it, sorry. Alright, so my starter thread is here on the left side, and the working thread is here on the right side. I'm going to move my thread and needle around the beads and get myself back over here to the starter thread so I can go ahead and tie a knot. Since I'm using the dragon thread size 6, tying a knot in this type of a bezel, you're more than likely not going to see it when you do the right over left, left over right knot that I can't remember the name of at the moment. Anyways, when you do that type of a knot, you usually can't see it. So I usually do it that way. There's other ways that you can tie it off as well. Some people will get here into the Delica portion, into the 4 rows. They'll go this direction a couple of beads on the diagonal, and then they'll change the thread and go back a couple of beads. Then they'll go back one more time, you know, things like that. That's another way that you can tie it off as well. So for me, I'm going to get my thread back over here so we can tie off. So I went through that first bead in the first row, or that next bead in the first row of the 15s. I'm going to go ahead and go on a diagonal to the first row of the Delicas. Go ahead and go through that one. Now I'm going to change my thread, so I'm going to go through the 3rd row of the Delicas. So here's your first row. Your second row is in between your first and your 3rd. So I'm going to change the direction of the thread and go through the 3rd row. Now I'm just going to go through a diagonal through 2 beads. So I'm going through row 2 and then coming out row 1. And then I'm going to do that again, row 2 to row 1, until I get to the starter thread so I can tie off. So this pendant I named Grandma's Garden after my grandmother. I was actually named after my grandmother, and she was a very good gardener as well as my grandfather, and I wanted to name a video after her. So here you go, Nanny. Alright, so now I was coming out of the 2nd row of Delicas. I'm jumping over to the 3rd row of Delicas, and I'm going to go ahead and go through the, let me think about this. I'm going to go through the 4th row of Delicas. This is just kind of problem solving. How do I get my thread back over to here where it's going to line up with where the thread is sitting at right now? So I'm going to go through that 3rd row and then the 4th row. Then I'm going to change the direction of the thread again, and I'm going to go in the opposite direction through the 2nd row of Delicas. Now my thread is matched up with the beginning thread. So now you can do your right over your left, left over your right. I do it where I go make the small loop, and then the small thread goes through that loop towards the front, and the small thread goes through the loop towards the back, and it ends up being the same thing. So now I have my knot there, which you can't see at all. So I'm going to take my thread and needle, and I'm going to work towards the back on a diagonal again. So go through a couple beads at a time if you can. If you cannot, just take it one bead at a time. You don't want to break any beads. If you've gotten this far, it'd be very sad. And then I'm just going to end by going through one of the first rows of the Delica, or the 15s in the back. And then that's where I'll tie off. Then I'll take my beginner thread, I'll put a needle in the end of that, and then I'll do the same thing, going in this direction, because that's where this thread, and I went this way, this direction towards the back with the working thread, so I'm going to go in the opposite direction towards the back with the beginning thread, but I'll put a needle in the end of that and do the same thing. And then all you have to do is just burn off your ends, and then you'll have your separate Rivoli already fully bezeled. So then the next step, we'll start working on these petals. So meet me back once you get your Rivoli completely done, and I'll show you how to start on your petals. Okay, so now we're ready to start with the petals. So you're going to need your teardrop form, and you'll need the rest of your beads as well. So you'll need your 8/0s, still need your Delicas and your 15s, and then you'll also need your 4mm bicones, if that's what you choose to use. You can probably use round beads also if you want to. 4mm is what I used, so I feel like that fits a little bit best. So just whichever one that you want to use. Alright, so let's get started with it. So I have another thread, again in the white, I'm sorry, but another half of a wingspan worth of thread on my needle. And what I'm going to do with the other end is I'm going to tie it to this frame. So there again, we're just going to make a knot, overhand knot. I believe that's what it is. The right over left, left over right, or small thread going away from you and towards you, which right now is kind of hard for me to do. I don't know why. Ay, ay, ay. Okay. And I think that's the same direction, actually. So we're going to go this way. And there we go. Okay. So now I have the... my dog is sitting right next to me. You can probably hear him licking his lips. Alright, so I have the knot now down towards the end, right next to the point. So now we're going to do our brick stitch and add our 8/0s to our form. So to do the 8/0s around the form in brick stitch fashion, you'll need 24 of your 8/0s. I already have them sitting right here in the corner, so I don't have to worry about counting them. To start off, you'll need your 2 8/0s on your needle and thread. We're going to go under the frame, over the frame, whichever one you want to do. It's just easier for me to teach it if I go under. I'm going to pull the beads down to the end, just making sure that I'm holding onto the beads to where the beads don't go under the frame also. Make sure your thread is going over the frame now, and what you want to do is go back through that last bead once again, so that way when you go through it again, it will end up sitting on the frame like that. And that's brick stitch. So the next one that you'll do, you'll just do 1. So you add that, hold on to the bead, make sure you're going around the frame, and go back through the bead one more time. Make sure that when you're going back through that bead, that you're going from the bottom of the bead, so the hole or the side of the bead that's closest to the frame, and going back outwards when you're going back through the bead. Then that way you know that you're going in the right direction. If you go the opposite direction, this is what will happen if you try to go the opposite direction. And then your bead sits wonky like that. And that's not what we want. So we want to make sure that you're going in the correct direction. Go from... go through the bead, going from basically the bottom of the bead, or the part of the bead that is closest to the frame, outwards. And when you pull tight, that's what happens. So go ahead and add the rest of your beads around. Your last bead will sit basically like this, right next to the first bead on the other side of the frame. So go ahead and get those done, and I'll meet you back and I'll show you the second round. Okay, so I got my 24 beads on my frame, and we're going to continue on to the second step, but I'm also going to show you what to do if this happens. So as you can see, when you're looking at my frame, I've got my bead number 1 and then my bead number 24. Well, 24 should be a little bit closer to the first one there. So what you can do if this happens to you is just kind of massage your beads a little bit and see how I'm moving it a little bit closer. And sometimes you have to move the first ones up and around a little bit too. Just make sure you're not twisting them to where the beads are starting to go on the one of the other edges, either this edge or the back edge or something. Just make sure it's not. So that way, now they're more closer together. Reason for that will come clear here in a second. So our thread is coming out of bead number 24. We actually want to be going out of bead number 24, but towards bead number 1, because we're going to add a Delica in between those. It's going to be part of our way of getting our petals onto the Rivoli. So in order to do that, we need to change our direction of the thread. So you can do this in a couple of different ways. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to bead number 23, the one just to the right, go down it towards the frame, go through the frame. So now I'm on the back side, and then from the back side, go back up through number 23. And then now I can go down number 24 towards 1. Not going through 1 just yet because I'm going to add a Delica. And then now I can go through bead number 1. Now we're going to change that Delica into a right angle weave or raw stitch. So to do that, we need to get back to the Delica. And currently we're coming out of bead number 1. So I'm going to go down bead number 2. Basically, I'm just doing the same thing as I did on the other side. Go through the frame, and from the back side, go up bead number 2. And now I'm set to where I can go down bead number 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and go through that Delica and come on out. And to do the raw stitch, we're going to add a 15, another Delica, and then a 15. And then we're going to circle around that Delica. And then go ahead and come out bead number 24. Now we're set up. Once you pull that down tight, there's your raw stitch. And now we're set up to continue on with the second row of brick stitch. Now right now, I'm going to go ahead and flip my form over. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the beginning thread and burn that down right away, just to get it out of the way. So get that out of the way so we can see a little bit better. Okay, so we're coming out of bead number 24, and we're going to start our second row of brick stitch. For that, we will start with a Delica, a 15, and a Delica. We're coming out of bead number 24. You want to go underneath that bridge thread between 24 and 23. I just sew towards myself because it's easier that way. Same style as the last time. You want to go back up through that last bead that we just added, so that's second Delica. And then when you pull tight, that leaves 2 Delicas with a 15 in the middle that looks like a picot. So from here on out, you would add 1 15 and 1 Delica. Go to your next bridge thread if that's where it needs to be. I'll explain that in a second. Go underneath it. Make sure your thread's going not back underneath the bridge thread, and then go back through your second bead that you added, which was your Delica. Now, what to do when you add your 15 and your Delica, but your bridge thread is way over here. And if you were to add a Delica, then your Delica is going to be should be sitting way over here. So what to do then? Just go back through the same bridge thread that you just previously went through. And then go back through your bead again. That second bead that was added. And then now, your beads are still sitting there where they should be. So this is all you do on this round. Just make sure that you're not too diligent about how many of these Delicas that you put around. If you end up with a bunch here on this side, and then it starts to kind of not be as many, you don't have as many around the edges and stuff like that, or vice versa. You have a little bit here, and then whenever I was doing them, usually I would start off with just a little bit sitting here, and then as I got to the curve, I would have to start going through that same bridge thread twice, almost every single bridge thread, until I got back towards the straighter edge again. And that's fine. Just do as many of these, the second row of the brick stitch as you want, to make it look like the type of petal that you want it to look like. If you want it nice and full like I've been doing, then go ahead and make it full. If you want it a little bit more looser and not as many of these in between, go ahead and do that. It's your idea that you want to do. It's your design. So go ahead and finish this, go all the way around, back over here to the beginning, and meet me back, and then I will show you the next step of our petal. Okay, so now you have your petal with your first two rows of your brick stitch on there. So now we're going to add some decorations in the middle here, and then we're also going to attach those decorations to our little right angle weave or raw stitch down here in the bottom. Alright, so you should be coming out of your last Delica that you just added. What we want to do is we want to move around our 8-ohs up and down until we get through the 6th 8-oh going in this direction. Let me explain. So I'm coming out of this Delica, the Delica, the last one that we added. Go through that 15 that you added in that last stitch as well. Go down that next Delica, and if you can, go ahead and go down the 8-oh along with it. So now you're coming towards the inside of the form through 8-oh number 2. So go ahead and pull your thread tight on that. Then we're going to go up through 8-oh number 3. Sorry, my cat was doing something. So we're going to go up through 8-oh number 3, down through 8-oh number 4, up through 5, and then down through 6. Whoops. If you catch the Delicas like I just did, just go ahead and back out and just go through the 8-ohs. You can go through the Delicas if you want, just make sure you go around the 15 as well. So now that's 8-oh number 6. So we're going to go down that. Then we're going to add a 15, a bicone, and another Delica. So I have a 15 bicone Delica. I'm going to bring that down to the form. Okay, I'm going to flip the form around so it's easier for me to show what I'm doing. And then I'm going to bypass, meaning I'm going to skip over the Delica, go back through the bicone and the 15, then have the needle go towards the back of the frame. So I'm going through the bicone and the 15. I skipped over the Delica, and then I have the needle going through the form towards the back. I'm going to hold those beads together, and then I'm going to pull tight, and of course you have a little bit of thread left over. If that happens, try to just grab onto your Delica and then pull your thread. And then that should, after a couple of tugs, make your thread a little bit closer to the form. So now I'm going to turn the form to the back. I'm going to go back through that same bead, that same 8-oh, which is number 6, going outwards again, but my thread, or my needle, is coming out the front of the form. So I'm flipping it back to the front. And then now you have a decoration sitting there on the inside. So now we're going to skip 2 8-ohs, and we're going to do the same thing on that third one. So go down the next one on the left, go up the second one, and then towards the center on the third one again. And then you pick up a 15 bicone Delica, bring that down to the form, skip your Delica, go back through the bicone and the 15, and come out the back, holding your beads, just like that, flipping it to the back, and go back through that same 8-0 with your needle coming out towards the front. We're going to skip 2 more. So there's bead number 1, bead number 2, go down bead number 3, okay, we're going to add the same beads on this one, but the attachment's a little bit different. So add the same beads, the 15, the bicone, and the Delica, go down to the form, skip your Delica, go through your bicone and your 15, needle coming out towards the back, hold on to your beads, tighten them up if you need to. Okay, so we are currently coming out of this bead right here. I flipped it to the back, so I'm now on the back side, so we're currently coming out of this bead right here. We want to go through the next bead in line, because these are the 2 beads that are in the center, or close to the center at least, close enough. So we want to go through that next bead in line. So it's a little bit different on this one. And then that should center that third one more in the center of the frame. So now we're going to continue on and skip 2 more. And then we're going to put another one in that third. So, whoops, beads flying. And then go through your bicone and your 15 towards the back. Oops, that was not on screen, sorry. And then back through the 8-0 again. And if it ends up being a little loose while you're tightening them like this, it's okay. This next couple of steps and everything should help with that a little bit. If you need to, you can always go back through your beads one more time just to reinforce. So this is the last little portion that we're going to do. So we're skipping our 2 beads. And then we're going to add the beads to the third one. Same beads again. 15, bicone, Delica. All the way down. Skip the Delica. Go through the 15. Oh, here comes Kylie. I'm not sure if you saw her or not. That was my daughter's cat, if you did. And then we're going to go back through the same bead again. Alright, so then the next step is we're going to connect these Delicas that we just added together. So to do that, we need to get the thread back down this direction. So I'm going to go up. You notice how some of the Delicas are, there's multiple Delicas to this one 8-0. There's one here that you can get to, here, and here. Just pick which one you want to go up, and then go whichever way you want to. Just depends on your design. And if you can get to the 15 on the right, go through that one. If it's easier to go through the 15 on the left, then go through that one. But whichever way you go, then you need to go down the next Delica with whichever way that you went. So that way you can go back down your 8-0 towards where your 15 and bicones are at, because that's what you're going through next. So go through your 15 and your bicone. If you catch on to the Delica, great. If not, don't worry about it. So now you have your Delica. So you go through the Delica, go through the next Delica in line, before you get to the middle one there in the center, add a 15. Then you can go through your center Delica. On the other side of the center, add another 15. And then go through the next two. Like that. Oh, here comes Kylie again. She likes to do this little up down thing. The next thing to do, she just turned my lights on. Okay, hopefully that's better. The next thing to do is we're going to add a 15, an 8, and a 15. And we're going to go back through what we just did. So back through the Delicas, here on the side. Come on, Kylie, do you want to get down? We're going to go through the 15 and the Delica and the 15. And then the next two Delicas, the 15 and the 8, and then stop. So it should look something similar to that. So now we're going to add some more beads down this way so we can connect to our right angle weave down here. So those are going to be a 15 Delica, 8 bicone, 8, whoops, Delica, 15. So basically you're starting off with the smallest bead, working up to the bicone, and then going back down to the smallest bead again. So 15 Delica, 8 bicone, 8 Delica, 15. Now your threading is coming out, or mine is coming out the left hand side of that 8-0. So I'm going to go through the left hand side of the very tip of the Delicas down here in this right angle weave that we made down here. I go through that and pull tight. Then I'm going to add another 15 that I don't have on my mat. Need to add some more. I'm going to have a 15 and another Delica. I'm going to skip over that 15 and Delica down here. I'm going to go through the 8, the bicone, and then the 8, and then come on out. Then I'm going to add another Delica, another 15, and then I'm going to round out through that 8 that's up there in that circle. Now I'm going to go through these beads one more time. And then after that, I would suggest to tie off and have individual pieces. So once you get up here, I'm going to continue around the 8, go ahead and go through the 15 that is on the left of the 8. I'm going to go up one of these one of these Delicas. I'm going to tie off right here. Uh-oh, there we go. And then I'm going to go through the next Delica and the next 15. I'll make another knot right here. And then what I'll do after that is go through the Delica and then up the bicone and the 15. Come out towards the back. So I'll flip this around again. I'm going to go through one of the 8s up here. If I hit one of the Delicas, great. I think I did. Because that's where that last knot is going to go. Is in between the Delica and one of the 15s. And then I'm going to go through that 15. Going in the same direction, go down the Delica. And then that's where I will burn the thread off. So then you have your petal complete. So now that you have one done, you have 5 more to make. And then after you get all 6 of these done, meet me back and I will show you the next step. Alright, now that you have 6 of your petals done, now it's time to attach the petals to the frame. So what we'll end up doing is on your Rivoli, remember that we counted rows to where your first row of Delicas is here, then you have your second row, your third row, and then your fourth row. When we attach the petals to the Rivoli, we're going to be going through row 3, or in between row 3, so we're going to be working in the ditch part of row 3, which is in between those two beads, and then through row 4. So we'll be in between the two beads of row 3, and then working with the bead in row 4 of the Delicas. So I have a new amount of thread on my needle, and I'm going to attach it to the frame right away. So I'm just going to go through one of the beads on row 4, doesn't matter which one. Bring it down to the end of the thread, just enough to where you can tie it off here in a second. I'm going to change the direction again of the thread, and I'm going to go back in the opposite direction through row 2. Now, holding on to your stop thread so it doesn't go anywhere, go ahead and pull that tight. Then we're going to go through row 1 again, and then we're going to go and, whoops, see, I pulled a little too tight there. Then we're going to change our direction of the thread and go through row 3. Now your two ends are together, so we will just tie that off into a knot. I would suggest to go ahead and burn this down. Usually it's best to wait to burn it down until you have most of your project done, or at the very end, but we're about to add a lot of beads here at the back, and your thread may get caught in between a bunch of beads and you may not be able to get to it. So make sure it is your end thread and not the thread that you're working with, that you're burning off, because then you'll have to do this step all over again. And then just burn this down close to the product. Okay, now I would suggest to go through, am I on screen? Sorry. I would suggest to go through at least 1 or 2 beads, but we want to be coming out in between that row 3. So I'm now coming out of the row 3, and I'm in between the two beads of row 3. So now we're going to add our first petal. Now remember when we did that right angle weave at the very end of the first round of the brick stitch, and then before we started the second round. So this is the bead that's in between the two Delicas. Then we turned our thread back around, and then we added the other 3 beads. So the 2 15s and this Delica. Now this Delica is also the one that we attached to the long portion of our decoration on the inside of the petal. That is the Delica that you want to start off with. So it was the Delica that was sitting down here in the right angle weave. So that's the one that you want to start off with. Now, making sure that you're going in the right direction, my thread is actually pointing in a clockwise direction at the moment. So I want to make sure that I pick up my petals to where they're facing frontwards and not backwards. There is a slight difference to them. So you have your right angle weave on the front here, and the back, you see the frame. You see the frame completely. Whereas on the front, it gets cut off because you have that right angle weave. So this is your front, and then this is your back. So you want to make sure that you're putting your petals on in the correct direction. So for me, since I'm going in a clockwise direction, I'll need to pick up my petal through that Delica, going from the left to the right. And then when you pull that down close to the Rivoli, then you want to make sure that you're coming out of that Delica on that third row. You want to go through the next Delica on row 3 and dropped that, sorry. So once you go through that next Delica and making sure things don't twist, the Delica that was in that part of the right angle weave should be sitting just about in between the two Delicas on row 3. So now we're just going to switch our thread around and go through that whole thing one more time. So I'm coming out of a Delica in row 3. I'm going to switch directions, go counterclockwise now, go through the Delica in row 1. I'm going to go as a diagonal through row 2 and hit row 1 again if I can. Switching directions one more time, and I may have to turn this around. This is kind of hard for me to do. But we're switching directions again. We're coming out of Delica row number 1. We're going to switch directions and go through that first Delica in row number 3. If you can hit the Delica in the right angle weave, go ahead and grab that too. But if you can't, take it one bead at a time. So there is the first Delica we started going through. I can now go through my right angle weave Delica, and then I'm going to go through the next Delica in row 3. I'm going to flip it in my hands a little bit again. So now that should be a little bit more secured. So now you have two threads going through that right angle weave. Now, when I flip it to the back, see how it's flopping over? We need to attach that Delica, which is the first Delica, the ones in between the 8 O's, to row number 4, which is directly below the Delica that we just added. So now we are coming out. This is that second bead in row 3. So now we need to switch our thread in a different direction. So the bead directly below it is this 15O in the first row of 15s that we added on the back. So we're going to go through that bead in a clockwise direction. If you can hit that Delica that's on a angle from it, oh, I gotta flip it this way. If you can hit that Delica at the same time, then it just saves an extra step. But if you can't, take it one bead at a time. So I'm going through the 15, and I'm also going through that Delica in row 4. Now we're going to square stitch this Delica in the right angle weave to the Delica number 4 in row number 4. So to do that, you go through the Delica, and then in the right angle weave, then you go back through Delica number 4, or in row 4, and then pull that tight, and it should pull it closer to your Rivoli now. I'd go through this at least one more time. So we're going to go through that. And then go back through it one more time. Delica number 4 on that side. So now your first petal is attached. So go ahead and get that done, and then I'll show you how to attach the next one. Okay, so now we're ready to add petal number 2. And this is going to be the same way up until you get to petal number 6. Petal number 6 is going to be slightly different. So this is going to be the same for up until then. So you can just rewind this if you need to, if I don't make it clear, or if you need help with adding petal number 3 and so on. So currently we're coming out of that Delica in the 4th row. What we're going to do is remember that we started in between the Delicas in rows number 3. So we're going to skip 3 of those spaces, and then we're going to go in number 4. So there's 1, 2, 3, and then go into number 4 right here. So to get there, we're coming out of that Delica number 4 back here in the back. It is kind of hard for me to get to on a diagonal to number 3, so I'm going to go down to the first row of the 15s. And then make sure my thread does not wrap around the petal, which becomes a little difficult in a little while when you get multiple petals on, but it's still workable. And then we're going to go through that Delica in row 4, which actually has my knot in it. So we will get covered up now. So I'm going through Delica number 4, and I was able to get through Delica number 3, or in row 3 also. So let's make sure that we only skipped one. So here's where our petal sits. Here's the first ditch that we're skipping. And then here's number 2, here's number 3, we're going into 4. So we're at number 2, so I'm going on a diagonal through row 4 and row 3 to skip the second ditch. And then skip the third one. Oh. Okay, so let me make sure. 1, 2, 3. And then this is where we're going to add our next petal. So now our thread is moving in a counterclockwise direction. So we need to make sure that we pick this up in the right way. So to make sure of that, we're going to pick it up from the right to the left direction. And then my thread is coming out of this current Delica. We're going to go to the next one in line in row 3. And then when you pull tight, I'm going to turn it around so it doesn't hit the other petal as much. Then you can see that you almost have it done. So now we're going to do that little turnaround thing and put another thread of our round of thread through that Delica. So I'm coming out of row 3. I'm going to switch directions and go through row 1. And then also row 2, if I can get it. And it's very, very loose right now. There. When you tighten it up, it should go back to form again. Then go back through the next Delica in line and from row 1. And this is where we're going to switch directions again. Now we're going to go through Delica row 3. If you can reach the right angle weave Delica, great. If not, just go through the row 3, and then you can get the raw Delica here. And then go through your next row 3 Delica in line. There we go. I kept missing it. Okay, so that first part of the right angle weave is attached. Now we have to attach the part in the back. So we're coming out of the third row of the right angle weave, or third row Delica. We're going to switch directions, thread directions. We're going to go through that first row of the 15s in the back. Then we're going to go through on a diagonal that Delica sitting right next to where you're at. Then we're going to square stitch on this Delica from the right angle weave. So you went through the right angle weave, now you're going through the Delica again in row 4 and go through the right angle weave one more time. And the Delica one more time. I don't know, I may have done this already twice, but adding another row is not going to hurt anything. So go back through the Delica and the right angle weave. Now, what do you do to get set up for the next one? Because we're going in a counterclockwise direction, which is to the left, but our thread is pointed towards the right. So now you just have to do some investigating to see what's going to be the easiest thing to do. And honestly, you're not going to see any thread that's back here. It's about to get covered up with a bunch of 8/0s. So honestly, when you're coming out of that right angle weave from here, and if you're facing the wrong direction, just go straight through that 15 and that first row of 15s in the back. There's going to be such a small amount of thread sitting there that it's really not going to be that big of a difference. And then now you're set up to where you can move on to the next petal. So move your thread and needle through and skip 3 holes or ditches in between row 3 and then go into number 4. So continue to do that until you get all your petals on except for that last one, because that last one and the count is slightly different. So get the other petals on except for the last, and I'll meet you back and tell you what to do. Alright, so when you get your 5 petals on, you will notice, and those that know math well enough will know that when you have 23 spaces, 6 does not go into 23 evenly. So after you get your 5 petals on, you're not going to have enough space in between petal 5 and petal 1 to put petal 6 by skipping 3 spaces and going into the 4th. So on this last one, we're only going to skip 2 spaces and then go into that 3rd space. And then the in between petal 6 and 1 will still have the 3 spaces that you skipped going into the 4. So this one, that's the only thing that you do different, is that you skip 2 spaces, go into your 3rd space, which would be right in here, and then add your 6th petal. When you're done adding your 6th petal, you want to be coming out of that Delica in between the 2 8-ohs. So just make sure you're coming out of that Delica, and then I'll meet you back and I'll show you how to start adding the 8-ohs around the back to give the petals a little bit more stability, and then we'll start filling in the space around the Rivoli to give that a little bit more of stability and protection as well. Meet you back in a minute. Okay, so now we got our 6 petals on, and now we're going to start adding some 8-ohs in between the petals, so that way it helps to get them a little bit more stable. Our thread is coming out of that 6 petal, that Delica in between the 2 8-ohs. Go ahead and go through the next 8-oh that's in line, and then come out the Delica right next to it. This is where we will add our 8-ohs. So go ahead and pick up an 8, and then you want to go through the sequence of the Delica, the 8-oh, the middle Delica that you're using to secure the petals, and then come out that last Delica and not go through any of your 15s. So you've got the Delica, the 8, the Delica, 8, Delica. And then when you pull tight, that should situate, and do it slowly because your thread will go around the petals quite a lot if you haven't noticed already. And then that should situate your 8-oh in between. It's going to be a little loose at the moment, but that's okay. After we get all 6 of the 8-ohs situated, then we're going to go back through this round one more time just to give it a little bit more stability. So add your 8, and again, go through those 5 beads. Delica 8, Delica 8, Delica, and try not to catch on to the 15. If you do, just come right back out and try again. When you pull, that situates your Delica in between. So go ahead and finish your last of your 8-ohs, and go, like I said, go through that round one more time, and then you'll want to be coming out of your first 8-oh that we added over here to add the next round, because that next round will start filling in the back part of the Rivoli. So go ahead and get that part done, and I'll meet you back in a minute. Okay, so after you get your first round of 8-ohs, the back should look something similar to this. So now we're going to use those extra 8s that we just added in between the petals as our bases to add the extra protection to the Rivoli in the back. So coming out that first 8-oh that we added, we're going to add 3 8-ohs in between the next one. So if you're getting confused as to which ones are which, just look for your point of your form right here, and just remember that those 2 8-ohs on either side of that point are part of your petal. And those are the ones that we need to skip. We need to go in through the one that's in between the petals. So your 3 8/0s will go in between. Just like that. So then add your 3. And then make sure to skip those 2, go in between the 2 petals. And then just go through that 1 8/0 right there. And then, like I said, pull slowly because your thread can still get caught in between your petals. So go ahead and go through, add the rest of this on this row, and then I'll show you the next row. Okay, this next row, we are coming out of that first 8/0 that we started this row on. This one, we're going to go through the first 2 of the 3 that we added from that previous row. And then this one's very simple. We're just going to add 1 8/0 and then go through the middle of the 3 8/0s that we added from that previous row. And that's all you do. So you got 1 8/0 and then go through that middle one. So this one is also pretty simple. The next one we're going to do something slightly different just so we can kind of fill in the rest of that space. So go ahead and add your 1 8/0 in between the grouping of 3s, or in between the grouping of 3s, but through that middle bead. And meet me back in a minute and I'll show you the next one. Okay, now your flowers should look something similar to this. Now to add that last round of 8/0s, what we will do is go through 2 of the 8/0s that we added on the last rotation. Make sure your thread doesn't catch, and then we will add 1 8/0 to the needle, then go through 2 again. So in this, excuse me, in this rotation, we will just add 3 8/0s to the mix. Pick up 1, go through the next 2. And then pick up 1 and go through the last 2 that are left there. Go ahead and step up into that first of the 3 that we just added on this row. And we will just connect those 3 beads and then go through that at least once more time. So just go through that one, go through the second of the 3 that we added, and then the third one, and connect it back to the first. So that's all you do on this part, and then just go through that last round a couple of times if you need to. What we'll end up doing next is getting up to one of the petals. So after you get that done, then you have to decide, okay, which petal is going to be my top petal? How is it going to hang? Is it going to hang good this way or that way? So you have to figure out which one's your top petal. Once you figure that part out, I'll show you how I get up to the top to where we can add our bail to the back of this, and our pendant will be done after that. Meet me back in a minute. Okay, so now we have the back of our Rivoli covered up with our 8/0s. I went ahead and tied off a couple of knots and everything, and then wove through some more of my beads and all, and burnt off thread. I'm going to do my bail that is up here. So I chose which petal I wanted to have my bail in, and I have tied out, or somewhere down in here, I've already gotten rid of the other thread, the other end of the thread, but somewhere in the front of the petal I tied on a new piece of thread and then worked my way through until I got through this Delica underneath the middlemost bicone of the petal that I want the bail to be in. So for our bail, the biggest thing about bails, especially when you're using seed beads, is that you want to make sure that you're going to make your bail big enough, but not too big, for whatever you're going to put your pendant on. So you need to figure that out first. What are you going to be using for your necklace? For me, I'm going to end up using just cable, and then stringing my seed beads on to that cable. I might add a bicone or two here or there, something like that. I'm not going to show you how to do that because Allie has plenty of videos on how to use beading wire, or beading cable, excuse me, to be able to make a necklace. I'm not as proficient as far as using the crimp beads and showing you how to do that and everything, so I feel like I don't know it well enough yet to be able to teach it, because I don't want to teach something and then it be wrong and somebody mess up and I get blamed for it. So I'm just going to tell you that's what I'm going to end up doing. You'll see it in pictures if you haven't seen it already and everything of what they're going to look like. So for my bail, I'm going to make 11 rows of my 15, using my 15 OC beads. I'm going to start off down here in the Delica, like I had said. Then we're going to attach it to the 2 middle 8/0s up here at the top. So the stitch that we're going to be doing is, I call it a modified herringbone. I don't know if that's really what it's called. I believe it could be called a square stitch, just using two beads. But anyways, whatever it's called, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to put those 2 seed beads on. I went back through the Delica again, and then I'm going to go back through that. This is hard to do sitting this way. I'm going to go back through that first that first 15 that we added. So there, now you can see it a little bit better. Then I'm going to add 2 15s again. I'm going to go down the second Delica, or darn it, second 15. I'm going to go ahead and, on this row, I'm going to go ahead and go back through the Delica again. And then I'm going to go back up the 2 15s on the left. And those 2 guys. And now I'm set up to where I can add my next row. And pick up 2 15s, go down the right side, just go down the 1 bead on the right. And then flip over to the bead directly to its left, so it's that second 15 that we added, and then going back through that first 15 of the 2 that we just added on this row. And when you pull tight, then they start looking like that. So like I said, I'm going to do 11 of these rows, so I'm going to try to speed up a little bit and see if I can get these done a little faster. Which, of course, it's not going to work very fast. So what I'll probably end up doing is just doing another segment to show you where to go to tie it off. So like I said, for mine, I'm going to do 11 rows of that, and then give me a second, let me finish it, and then I will come back and show you where to attach it. Okay, so here's the last part of the step of adding your bail. So my thread needle is coming out to the left hand side right now. I've got my 11 rows of 15 sitting there. So now I'm going to attach it to these middle 2 8/0s that's on the petal that I'm using. So I'm coming out of that left hand side, so I'm going to go down from the top to the bottom, or basically from the outside towards the inside, or towards the frame of that 8/0 in the center. That is on the left side of those 2. And once I get a hold of the needle again, I can pull down, and then that pulls it close to the frame. Now, of course, you can't see it because it's all covered up. What I'm going to end up doing is I'm moving my needle underneath the bail right now. The thread went into the one on the left. We're going to go up the middle bead, middle 8/0 on the right hand side. Just make sure your thread was underneath the bail so that way it doesn't wrap around the bail. And then we're going to go back down the 11/0 on the right. Now you can go down 1 row, you can go down 2 rows, 3 rows, just a couple of rows. I mean, you can go down multiple rows right away if you wanted to, but we're about to go back through everything again a couple of times. So I went down 2 beads. So just make sure that you're going directly to the left. And of course I can't see it that far away from my face to figure out where the beads is at. Okay, now I'm through that bead. Then when you pull tight, that should pull it back to the frame again. Okay, so that's basically all you need to do for this last stitch, is just go through this a couple of times. I'm going to go back through the beads that I just did, where I go down the left hand side, 8-0, go up the right hand side, 8-0, and then what I'll end up doing is I'll go straight down the right hand side of the bail, go back through that Delica, go straight back up the left hand side of the bail, and then do probably that at least one more time, and then I'll tie off down here in the bottom somewhere. So after you get that done and you string together your necklace, or however, whatever you want to do, then you have your pendant finished. So then that's how the peach and the turquoise would look, and then this was my blue and purple one that I did. Thanks so much for watching my tutorial today on my grandma's garden necklace. Again, if you're missing any of those supplies, the list is listed down below, along with links that you can go to PotomacBeads' website so you can purchase anything that you need. So stay tuned for the next video because I know it's going to be a good one.